Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Twitter Space. We'll be discussing the upcoming Cardano hard fork, the Plomin Hardfork, discussing everything from ecosystem readiness, SPO voting, tooling readiness, and things like that. So we have a whole bunch of great guests coming on. I see a whole range of them already. Let's see, we have Nicholas. Adam is also here. How are you doing? All right, let's see.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey, Nicholas. Hi, Adam. Having a
Hey,
good.
good morning, everybody.
Hello.
All right, we have Adam Rush as well. Ada Frog. I'm not sure if you want to come up. And Marcus. Let's see. Hello, everyone. So excited for this one. I'm curious to hear all of your thoughts. And where do you think this is heading? Let's see here. All right. We still have Marcus and Peyton that we're waiting on. But yeah, I guess we can get started already. So for, I think most people here know what the hard fork is all about. But maybe Nicholas, can you give a very brief introduction about the hard fork and what it means?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. And first of all, thank you, Âtrium, for having us. I think it's great that we have more spaces about the Plomin Hardfork. Also encourage people to participate, to vote, upgrade their nodes. So I'd be happy to give a short update about the hard fork. So this hard fork, the Plomin Hardfork, as it was agreed on with an info action, right? Initially, it was planned to be called Chang number 2 Hardfork, but now it's called Plomin Hardfork. There was an info action going on in memory of Matthew Plomin. And what this Plomin Hardfork does is basically it introduces the full governance feature set on Cardano. So I now have GovTools open and there are 7 bullet points of what it introduces. And please bear with me while I'm paraphrasing, I'm not reading through them. So the first thing it does, it introduces protocol major version 10. So for those that don't know, a hard fork from the on-chain perspective is basically only with air quotes upgrading the major or the minor protocol version. Then the second thing that the Plomin Hardfork enables is the 4 other governance action types. So in total, the 7 governance action types described in CAP 1694 are now, after the Plomin Hardfork, enabled. Very importantly, DREP voting will also only be possible after the Plomin Hardfork on governance actions that have an on-chain effect, because up until now, DREPs can only vote on info actions, and info actions, right, they are limited, they don't have an on-chain effect. So after Plomin, DREPs will finally be able to participate in governance meaningfully. And the fourth point, SPO voting will be enabled also on these other governance action types and where SPOs can vote. The Constitutional Committee will also be able to vote on these other governance actions. I mean, that's very obvious. And then 2 other very important things is that the staking rewards that still accumulate as usual, right? They can, after the Plomin Hardfork, only been withdrawn if you're delegating to a DREP, which also includes the predefined voting options auto abstain or no confidence. And then it's not just governance that is introduced with the Plomin Hardfork, but also these new Plutus primitives that have been also approved via a parameter update governance actions. So these are the 7 different main points that this the Plomin Hardfork enables. And very importantly, who has to approve the Plomin Hardfork? the governance action, the hard fork initiation governance action. Right now, that is the SPOs and also the Interim Constitutional Committee, the ICC. I think that's everything, or did I miss anything? Adam, or I need to now call you Mr. Rush or Mr. Dean and Ada Frog.
No, I think
I think you pretty much covered it all.
Yeah, pretty much. Interesting to hear. I was wondering why DREPs don't vote on this governance action, but it's of course because we're still in the bootstrap phase, I guess. So it's up to the SPOs and the ICC. Okay, that's good to know. So maybe we can move on to we can move on to SPO voting and ecosystem readiness. So SPO voting has been for the moment still quite low. I think I've noticed that most SPOs vote towards the end of a governance action. It's definitely interesting to watch, and the same for ecosystem readiness. So see how the dApps and the tooling are progressing. Adam, Rush.
Yeah. I think that you're bringing up some good points about like the participation being low so far. I'm certainly thankful for everyone who stepped up to make a vote. I personally would love to see people vote sooner rather than later because I think that it's good to get your vote registered and let people know. In regards to the SPOs, I do think it's good for the ICC members to take a little bit longer to look at this because especially for the fact that since there's less ICC members to vote, they can kind of be like a bit more of a coordination layer where they can like be when they cast their votes, like this is when it's going to be enacted on chain and it gives everybody a little bit more of a heads up in some ways. But I almost feel like right now at this stage in governance, we're kind of like witnessing a middle school dance. Like all the boys are standing on one side of the room, and all the girls are standing on the other side of the room, and nobody quite knows how to go and ask someone to get started because we're doing this for the first time. So some of the SPOs are saying like, oh, hey, we need to wait and see what's going on before we cast our vote. And I understand, I often wait until the deadline to turn in paperwork as well and my vote as well. But that doesn't need to be the case, right? You can vote now, and I think it's good if you do.
Yeah, I can relate to that. Me personally, as an SPO, I was also not sure if I needed to take into account ecosystem readiness in my vote as well. But yeah, I saw the last week that that's more the role of the ICC to take into account ecosystem readiness, and that as an SPO that's what I heard at least. We only have to consider our own pool readiness and the fact that if we want to proceed with governance the way that's been set up right now, I guess. So I think that might be a bit of a lack of communication there that we can still work on to clarify that, and think that might persuade more SPOs to vote right now if they only have to worry about their own pool and delegate and their own delegates. So any comments on ecosystem readiness from anyone?
I just wanted to kind of agree to your point there, Stephen. When it came to me voting, as a stake pool operator, I thought I was voting for the entire ecosystem's readiness and not just my own, even though that, I've been updated for quite a while. I did the update even before we went to Argentina. And that has kind of, kept me off from voting because I don't have, the greatest understanding of, where all the wallets are at. And, I was kind of just giving it some time. I personally am leaning, towards yes. That's kind of what I've been planning on, voting for a while. Adam, go ahead.
Yeah. So just to give some kind of understanding and context, ever since Shelley, right, and every other hard fork since then, SPOs and whether or not they've upgraded their infrastructure is probably the first ecosystem readiness indicator that everybody's ever looked at. Are enough nodes upgraded that it's like actually safe to do this hard fork. Because otherwise, if we go through the hard fork and not enough people have upgraded, everything stops and everything breaks, right? So that's always been like the first priority of stake pools. So now we're in this new governance era, and the reason it worked that way in the past is because we had the three key holding entities, IOG, Emergo, and CF, who could look at everything holistically, the entire ecosystem, and go, okay, SPOs have upgraded, and the exchanges are ready, and this guy over here that goes by Frog on Twitter, he said he's ready, so we're good, and now we can pull the trigger. And unfortunately, we don't have that anymore. And the other unfortunate part of this is, especially in a multi-node environment in the future that we're going to find ourselves in, we might not, people could put whatever in those numbers to say like, oh yeah, my pool supports version 27 or 69 and miner version 420, right? So you can't necessarily use that 100% for sure in a multi-node environment as a measure of, are the SPOs actually ready to safely go through the hard fork? So in my mind, the SPOs, for one, should be saying, I've tested this out. Everybody knows I love test nets. So you should be running this on a test net, make sure it can go through a hard fork, make sure everything's working correctly there. Then you go, okay, I'm ready. I'm confident that this is going to go on mainnet. And then once the action is proposed on chain, you again signal that you are upgraded, you're ready, and you want to proceed. Because for me, there's other actors, like in my case, the Constitutional Committee, where the primary goal of the Constitution is to keep the blockchain alive. So for me, it becomes the ICC or the CC's role to look at the entire ecosystem, just like what the key holders have done in the past, to really be the ultimate arbiters of whether or not the overall ecosystem is ready. Because I know a lot of SPOs who are highly, highly technical, but maybe they don't know about every single DeFi app that's out there and that people are using because they're server nerds running servers. And so they don't know who to even go and talk to or ask. So I don't want to overburden our SPO base because they are already so critical in terms of what they're deciding of whether or not we're ready. So for me, it's other people's job to look at the entire ecosystem. All we need the SPOs to do is decide whether or not the chain will survive moving forward. But yeah, go ahead, Nicholas.
Yeah, so first of all, I think we agree on way more things than we disagree. And for starters, I mean, going forward, I think really this ecosystem readiness, as Kyle also put very eloquently in a post today, is really the responsibility also of the one who is submitting the governance action, right? And in the future, in my opinion, the DREPs, right? Because they are really this governance body that can vote on all the governance action types. They are, in theory, only looking at governance and dealing with that, right? So in the future, I would see that they are taking charge here. But and my argument basically is because we now, in the Plomin Hardfork don't have the DREPs participate, the SPOs alongside the ICC, right, should be also looking at the broader ecosystem readiness when they vote on governance actions. And why do I think that, or why is it also important for me or why do I say why should SPOs consider ecosystem readiness? Because the ICC, right, they are constrained by the Constitution. And the Constitution, unfortunately, is not talking about ecosystem readiness when it refers to what the hard fork initiation governance action needs to check, like what checklist they need to complete, but it's rather talking about just the Cardano blockchain itself, right? And it says the Cardano blockchain, the governance action should not endanger the safety, the security, the functionality, and the performance of the Cardano blockchain. And if we go by that, right, the ecosystem readiness, so if some wallets or dApps do not work, I mean, that does not endanger the Cardano blockchain, right, in a way, at least in my interpretation. And it's then, I mean, if the ICC for some reason then believes it's not also their responsibility to look at that, we could end up in a situation where nobody's looking after it, right? And that is what I want to avoid, right? So I don't want to just put it on the shoulders of the SPOs, because I agree with you, their main responsibility definitely is keeping the network running. That is already a huge task. They're incentivized to do that, right? That's their job. That's what they signed up for. But I also know that some of the SPOs are one of the most active community members that care the most about Cardano. They really want to make a difference. They build great products. And I also think that they want to look at, or some of them want to look at the ecosystem readiness, right? So yeah, I hope that made some sense.
Thank you, Nicholas. Adam, you raised your hand kind of right in the middle of, do you have like a response? If it's a new topic, we'll go to Marcus because I think he was first up, but we'll do a response too if, Kyle up here, Adam Rush has a response to that.
Yeah, it's absolutely a response. And it's almost like I feel like I'm in between where Mr. Dean and Nicholas are right now. Because I kind of do feel like it is everyone's job to do governance who are participating here. And this is kind of where I get my metaphor of the dance going here. Like when you think about going to a dance, sure, there are rules. You can, you could find a book somewhere that tells you how to do it, but most people don't learn it from a book. Most people don't learn it from a class, in terms of like just going to a club, going to your school dance or whatever and learning how to dance. You just learn it by doing it. And so I kind of feel like that's what it's going to be for us for governance. Whereas, part of our problem is we have this missing component of no DREPs yet. And the DREPs are supposed to be, I'm voting for this because I think it is a good idea. That is the job of the DREPs. That is not the job of the CC. It is maybe somewhat the job of the SPOs, because they look at it from the perspective of, is this a good idea for my delegators, of in terms of making blocks. But I do think there is a role for the SPOs to be able to say the ecosystem's not ready, but it should only be when they really need to throw up a red flag and say, hold on, there's something really wrong here that I can see from my SPO perspective. But I do believe that the CC has a better way of coordinating to look at the details coming from our technical experts, such as the designers of the system who are putting forward the new node version, to talk to them to say what are the requirements that you need to see for the node to happen, and what should we be looking for, because the CC is by design a smaller and more nimble group able to coordinate better. So I think that these things will be worked out as we go. It's just a matter of getting more practice under our belt.
Thank you, Adam. Next up, we'll do Kyle if you have a response, or we can go to Marcus.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I want to bring in 2 or 3 main additional thoughts on the existing things. So first of all, I personally, as an SPO, tend more towards the opinion that I should also look to some other things just than my own infrastructure. And there are a couple of reasons. First of all, I don't see it as all SPOs should be redefined into this new position. It is an individual thing for every SPO. Very similar, like yes, there is a recommendation to have at least 2 relay nodes, and you should maintain your keys in a cold key and cold hot key environment, and so on. These are all recommendations, but nobody says you must, or this is your the thing you need to do. You can do it. Then there is the question if this is a redefinition of a role for an SPO. Maybe yes, but it would also be then a redefinition of the constitutional committee if it is not only supposed to look at a constitution, but also at the ecosystem readiness. So that's why I say both of them, as well as the DREPs, are completely free to see it personally, whatever they want to see it. Even a DREP can just say, oh, I like it, or oh, I want to celebrate the hard fork and do some party. I mean, it's not a good thing, but maybe someone just wants to see numbers go up and things proceeding and doesn't really care about resources or tended directions where we head after a hard fork enactment and so on. Then there is one last doubt that I want to bring up. There is a two-camera system between SPOs and DREPs. And let's assume we declare and we agree on that SPOs should only do what they do, and it is fully up to DREPs to decide about hard fork executions or ecosystem readiness. That would create a very, let's say, static and very, very hard, like like a crystal. So it is a very strong system, separating strongly and clearly the roles. And it is not a dynamic, a flexible system where you may see some stretches, some conflicts, and you can detect them already, but it is not immediately cracking something. In a very hard, like a crystal like separation model, it can go well for some time. But at the end, even if DREPs fully agree on some hard fork initiation, it's the stakeholder operators running an infrastructure, and they need to agree by 51% of the stake and by upgrading the software. So if we would assume now that we separate very clearly DREPs vote on all these political strategic things, and stakeholder operators should only care about running the infrastructure, it might come to a surprise point where a relevant number of SPOs says, no, that's not what we want to do, even if the other side decides this way. So this is why I think that having a flexible view on this and a flexible system that shows early enough some potential conflicts is a good thing to have.
Thank you, Marcus. I really appreciate all of that. Kyle, you're next up.
Hey, yeah, I mean, I'm looking at it like it's a pretty interesting point in time in the history of Cardano. You know, stake pool operators, I think a lot of them might not even really be paying attention because they've been off being stake pool operators. And you guys, you made a great point, Marcus, where operators shouldn't, most of them have been thrown into this role and weren't really asked for it in that way. It wasn't exactly presented that would be, a required critical component to make governance operate. So back to Adam's point, I do think adoption is going to take a little while, and it may help us to help answer, or create a frequently asked questions or something for a lot of them as we begin to kind of socialize governance more to get more traction, because we do kind of got to bring the SPOs up to speed. But we, there's ways, we've got channels and people we know, and, we remember and had a lot of communications coming together as SPOs to communicate that. In recent times, I think people coming to Cardano are familiar with the governance, but the way the kind of stake started in the past, there was, a wide distribution. We do know all those operators, and I think the SPOs can do a better job of socializing that. And yeah, I think towards the end of the vote, we will see a significant increase. As far as the actual separation of powers and introduction of governance, there's some really good points there too. The SPOs, ultimately do decide which software they're going to run. And, for me, I had a lot of thoughts about it. It's an important role. And in the past, we've always really made decisions, ultimately for the health of the infrastructure. And that's really where the SPO responsibility does lie. And this is about roles. And so, as far as ecosystem readiness, I think, Nicholas, kind of to counter your point, this is a unique case, right? This one where we're initiating first hard fork in hard fork initiatives in general. It's a chain health system and kind of concept from an SPO perspective. But to counter ecosystem health, as far as from a DREP perspective, I think, for example, ecosystem readiness, let's say a major tool isn't in place, and, it's a back end for a lot of dApps that constitute, I don't know, some percentage of users on Cardano. That DREP percentage ultimately in my future, that allocation, I think is going to be consolidated by applications' ability to consume TVL, right? So they're going to be able to manage their accumulated voting power, if you will. And in those circumstances, they'll support, even if they're not directly donating to open source projects, they'll support it in that manner. And so I think that you know, as far as voting yes and no and ecosystem readiness and that kind of stuff, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's probably I don't know, it gets nuanced for an SPO at this point because it's new. But in the future, ecosystem readiness is more distributed through DREP delegation power and dependency on ecosystem components that may not be ready, if you will, right? Like, so if Eternal's not ready, you know, they don't want to displease their users. They're all delegating to them. That's a pretty clear example. That's a large DREP. And then I think if you can consider that, multiply it out by thousands, that I think that's the ecosystem we're going to have. But then those thousands will all have independencies and dependencies on, you know, very, you know, different groups of good technologies. And so those will be the ones that are, you know, kind of considered as far as ecosystem readiness. So I think it's going to be a natural economic flow, and it'll flow, you know, in that way that benefits, I guess, you know, just naturally, just the natural economic flow of it. So I don't think we really have to worry about it, at least from an SPO's perspective. It's definitely the DREP's responsibility.
Thanks for your input, Kyle. Matthew, thanks for coming up. What do you have for us today? What are your thoughts?
Hey, Pei, and hey, everybody else. Yeah, so I was just thinking, I mean, there's this really interesting question about sort of who's the last line of defense, I guess, and like in particular for ecosystem readiness. And I don't know, you know, the answer to that question for sure. I do personally kind of lean a little bit toward the CC just because it's a smaller group. So there's basically less people that have to coordinate on that ultimate, you know, on the ultimate question. But that's, I mean, I think that's still an open question. It's not for me to decide. But one thing I wanted to point out is just that as far as, in my view at least, who should sort of play like traffic director or whatnot, the Hardfork working group, you know, is the place where that discussion happens, and you know, they're the ones that maintain that ecosystem readiness page. And I think it's, at the very least, whoever is, you know, with the different people who are voting, DREPs, SPOs, CC, if they don't have the information they need, like, ultimately that should go to the Hardfork working group as, okay, we don't have that information. So people shouldn't have to stress out about that. They should basically be able to ask the question, is the Hardfork working group doing a good enough job of gathering the information about ecosystem readiness so that whatever, you know, those responsibilities are for making the decision, you know, it's easy to make. And you don't basically have people sort of sweating over like, oh no, like, do I have to somehow individually myself be responsible for somehow assessing whether all of these different components are ready? The Hardfork working group is really where the that information is aggregated, and you bring together enough subject matter experts that you can say, you know, with confidence, yeah, we're ready to push this forward. And that should be the case, I think, as Kyle tweeted earlier, when the governance action is submitted, that basically there's enough confidence that we're at least on the trajectory, right, to having that readiness. So yeah, that's sort of my contribution. I guess one other thing is that we, just for SPOs in particular, we do have an SPO call tomorrow, and the Hardfork working group is going to be there. I mean, when I say the Hardfork working group is going to be there, in a sense, it's also at this Twitter space because many of the excellent speakers here are at the Hardfork working group as well. But if you have further questions, that would be a good place to jump in as well. And I think there's going to be a Q&A next week too. So lots of opportunities to get clarity on that before you have to vote.
Thanks, Matthew. I appreciate you plugging the working group as well. I think Adam was next up. Then we'll go to Nicholas.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to give a shout out to the Hardfork working group as well. They have a published set of upgrade readiness qualifications, and I'll go dig up that link and make sure we get it out for everybody to take a look at. And this part of this with people not knowing where they can find the resources and how to aggregate everything is, I think, part of our natural growing pains. And I also wanted to mention, we can always change our votes. So if something comes up, if you feel like you're seeing things go well and you want to vote yes, and things come up where you need to vote no, you can. If you feel like you need to vote no and you want to change it to yes, you can. Obviously it helps to the sooner that we have all the pass the enough votes to pass the threshold, the sooner we can also enact a hard fork. So for I've been outspoken in my belief that we should get it passed as quickly as possible to get the DREPs online, so the DREPs are fully empowered. But that's up to also everyone else to consider when they want to get their vote in. So yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Adam. And, I kind of want to raise that question. We're still going to go to Nicholas, but, what do you guys think that are up here right now? You guys have extensive knowledge. A lot of the people here have been, focused on governance, even when it was on SanchoNet, and even before that. So, do you think that, Cardano as a whole is ready at this point? And then you can end with that, Nicholas, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Peyton. I mean, my opinion, are we ready? Yes. Could we be readier? Also, yes. I think there is no perfect time of when you are really ready for governance, because as we now experience, right, governance can be messy. It should be messy, right? If you have different opinions, if you have a flourishing ecosystem, if you don't just live in a ecosystem where there's one voice, one rule, and that's it. I mean, that would be really sad. It's important to have this kind of discourse and also tension, right? Tension, friction that creates innovation, and innovation creates, let's stop there. But for me, right, I think, are we ready for governance as an ecosystem? Yes, I think so. And the state that we're currently in this bootstrapping phase, where we basically only have the interim constitutional committee and the SPOs making decisions, I mean, it's already better than just the Genesis keys, don't get me wrong, but I also really want to see DREPs become active, right? Given that we have a safe environment, that a stable node version and everything is fine, right? We should not just hard fork because we want to get it through and that's it. I think that's also kind of dangerous. But are we ready for governance as an ecosystem? I think so, yeah. And now just quickly coming back to my ecosystem, or to ecosystem readiness. I think the main problem is that we have not defined what ecosystem readiness really is, right? We don't have specific metrics that we need to meet besides the 85% of the pools need to upgrade according to the constitution. So what would be really helpful, in my opinion, is that we define these kind of metrics as an ecosystem, either in a CIP or, I don't know, with a new process, because I mean, there is this discussion, should CIPs be also have this kind of social layer attached to it? Probably not. Maybe there needs to be something else. But if we can agree to some sort of standard of what is ecosystem readiness, then we can really track it and check, and do not depend on the interpretation of the ICC or the interpretation of the DREPs or even the SPOs, right? I mean, ideally, we have some sort of standard that we can look that we can look to, and then, I mean, people can still disagree with it. That's the beauty of governance, right? You can vote the way you see fit, but if we have some sort of shared standard, it would make the life of everyone easier.
Yeah, I think if we had, some shared standard, it would make the life of everyone easier. I tend to get advice from somebody that helped work on, the first version of smart contracts for Cardano. And one piece of advice he gives me with Âtrium is, you're going to be unhappy when you ship it. Like, you have to be unhappy about at least one thing, or you're never going to ship it. We've been working on it for 2 years now. So I definitely see both sides here. So Marcus, go ahead.
Yeah, there's another point that I wanted to bring in. It is not following up on anyone on things said before here, but let's look at exchanges. So exchanges are stake pool operators and may also become DREPs. Not sure if they will be or what else, but they also have one other rule, and this is providing liquidity gateways. So it is quite important that they are really ready. Right now we are on a 32% today. So after the holiday breaks, it speeded up a little bit. We are on 14 exchanges ready, and 13 who signaled are in progress. For example, Binance is one that is currently in progress, and Binance provides more than 21% of the ADA liquidity on exchanges. So let's assume that we will follow an idea that SPOs should just vote as soon as possible for a yes. And Binance looking at all of this and saying, wait, you are all now triggering a hard fork, but we are not ready. So they don't say, wait. They may say, fuck you, sorry for the word, but if you don't wait for us, then we don't need you. So this is also a little bit of a respect thing. And then again, any SPO is free to vote immediately or as soon as possible for a yes. The decentralized part of the blockchain is that we always need to find a majority consensus. And the majority consensus is reached as soon, but not earlier, than when 51% or whatever threshold we have defined, because we have many different ones in our Cardano governance system, is reached. So if we reach 51% only with the support of larger exchanges, then it is absolutely okay if some SPOs cast a yes vote as soon as possible and some others later. But at the end, it is always required to convince a majority, and it will take some time to have a majority in. So just to have this also said, everyone is free to vote as soon as possible or as soon as he sees the thing ready to be triggered. But it also needs to be respected if some SPOs or some players in the ecosystem decide to vote later or even demand some time by voting later.
Thank you, Marcus. I appreciate you bringing up that point. I think it's very fair. We actually have Samuel Leathers up here. He's the head of product at IOG. How are you doing today, Sam? Good to see you.
Doing good. How are you guys doing today?
Doing better now that you're here. Have any input? Any comments?
Yeah. So in my opinion, I don't like the shaming on either side. I mean, you got people that are basically saying USPOs are stupid for updating without looking at ecosystem readiness, and then you have other people that are going at them and it's saying, come on SPOs, you're not doing your job, vote yes on this already. It's like, stop shaming people and let people do things and let people have their own measure of comfortability to vote on the hard fork, and it'll happen when it happens. That's what governance is. Governance is messy. We need to stop this like attacking people one way or the other for making a decision that the one way they have it.
I think that's very grounded. Adam, did you still have something? And if so, Kyle will be after that. If not, Kyle, you're up.
Yeah, I guess that means I'm good. I mean, yeah, it's all about participation and increasing participation. I think that's what we really need to focus on right now. SPOs, we've always had a good job of you know, our role is really, is the code good? Is the code good to run? Will the code, you know, is it going to run after it passes through and traverses the hard fork? And so, yeah, governance it's going to get exciting, but you know, there's some interesting stuff that you guys said as far as the timing, right? Like, okay, if Binance isn't ready, I mean, what percentage of liquidity is not ready to surpass the hard fork. We're headed into a bull market. That's one side of the argument. But then the other side is that we do not, this delaying a hard fork would, delay a treasury withdrawal, which we definitely can't do coming into a bull market. So timing matters. There's hard choices, but I guess, at least in my opinion, I don't think we can slow it down. We have to move. We've got to move fast. That this whole thing was a rocket ship we jumped on before we even finished building it, right? And this is the situation we're in. We've got to get funding. It's a bull market. If it was a year ago, I think, obviously I've had criticisms that we overcomplicated it a little bit, like timing just isn't right, but we are where we are. And I think we've just got to increase participation, and that's really what's going to make it successful. We've got to, make the tools easier, and a lot of tools are out there, but it's just, do we need incentives to incentivize this type of governance? There's more discussions to be had, but we've got to go and we've got a constitution to look at. We've got to get that approved. That's going to take time. It's going to take a hell of a lot more, I think, to get that ratified on chain than, a hard fork initiation. And we've got to, and then it comes, now we've got real kind of, how do we really navigate this? Is anybody very clear, at least in a broad community perspective, how community members would, interface or integrate or participate in interacting with the Cardano treasury or opportunities it provides, right? Like all that's still kind of being in its, infancy of formation, and at least it's not in a position to be communicated yet, but all of that is going to be changed. And one of the things that really needs to happen is, we need to really figure out a way to communicate how Cardano governance works in a way that's easily digestible, and it's not even really, I don't even think it's been readily defined as far as in a way that's been communicated broadly. And that needs to happen pretty quickly if we're, at least before we're able to increase community or participation.
For anybody just tuning in, we definitely need to increase governance participation. It's very easy how you can do so. You can become a DREP yourself right now by locking up 500 ADA. You can do it on gov.tools. That's a great place. There's also 1694.io, and you can go to both of those websites to find a DREP list. And if you don't really have the time to pay attention to all these complex issues, you can just delegate to a DREP, and there's many great ones out there. And you can go to lists on both of those sites that I just mentioned, gov.tools, 1694.io. You can go look for a list of DREPs in there, and you can delegate right now. It's just as easy as delegating to a stake pool. You take that little DREP ID, and you can copy and paste that in most wallets that says voting or governance. You just copy and paste that in there, and then you can delegate to a DREP. How much ADA is it? Is it just like 2 ADA, like delegating to an SPO, or is it cheaper?
Right. I
It's
think
the
it's cheaper if
same
you're already delegated to
registration
a
certificate as delegating to an SPO, and basically you can delegate to an SPO and a DREP in the same transaction even.
So it's a transaction
Awesome.
fee. Yeah, it's not the 2 ADA deposit unless you're also delegating to an SPO at the same time, right? Right.
Okay.
For the first time. The deposit is only when you first register the stake address on chain, which is also important, like when you're submitting governance actions, right? So, sorry, I had to do it. So it's a regular transaction fee is all it takes to delegate to a DREP.
Awesome. And as I said, it's really simple. You can do it today. I highly recommend it. Essentially, the more people that become DREPs or delegate to DREPs, it makes Cardano more secure. If you think about how we've, advertised how decentralized Cardano is, because there's so many SPOs out there minting blocks all over the world, this is Cardano's social layer. And it's it's similar. You have to decentralize it by participating, by becoming a DREP, by delegating to a DREP. So I highly recommend that. And the final thing I wanted to mention, we host these spaces every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So make sure you guys keep coming by. We're going to have great guests on each week, great topics, great projects. So we'll go to Adam after that.
Okay. So
can you guys hear Adam?
Yeah, he's okay.
cool. Yeah, I'm here. I wasn't sure what you said after that. So I think that one of the things that was mentioned, I think by Kyle, was that governance is messy, And I think that is a good thing. One of the things that we discussed in our Intersect Constitutional Council meeting yesterday was like, how can we make this more efficient? And I think that efficiency is good, like when as an operator, but to some degree, you don't want the governance system to be. You don't want to. I should put it this way: you don't want to focus on efficiency to be your metric for a governance system, because if you're trying to be too efficient, you're cutting off too much possibility for representation of different groups and people and potential creativity and thought. And so I think it's good that it's messy. I think it's good we're going through this. There are some things that I think we can learn along the way. Like I'm really questioning the inability for SPOs to set to auto abstain for even for hard forks. So sorry, Sam, I'm opening that can of worms, and I think we should be looking at that going forward. Because I think that if somebody doesn't want to be part of governance and they want to say, I want the rest of the SPOs to make that decision and make that vote, they should be able to easily abstain and say, I trust my fellow SPOs to make that vote. Um, and just the same as we have for people for like, ADA holders when they choose a DREP. But I think that, focusing on how do we get more people not just signing up begrudgingly and saying, I have to do this, so I have to go and do something, but instead enthusiastically saying, like, I really want to do this. I want people to trust me to make the decision. I want people to trust me to look into this and advise them. That's what's going to make for good governance. And that's what we're really aiming for going forward.
Thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. One thing, now that you're here, Sam, I wanted to ask you about the new Node version that just came out today. I saw a tweet this morning, someone, talking about the Node version, but I haven't had enough time to dig into it. I was planning on it later, but now that I have you here, I think it'd be good to, hear what's included in this update. Should SPOs upgrade to this now, or is the existing version for the hard fork good to go?
Very little, and yes, they should update. Okay, so let me, I can't really give you all the details on it, but if you recall back in July, how we put together the team where we brought together Andrew Westberg and Martin Lang and Phil and Alexi and some people from Consensus and whatnot to solve the DOS issue we had then. We came up with a very elegant solution that basically just added a ability to change how things behave in the mempool versus in a block. And we've reused that same thing for something that's been identified. I'm not going to go into the details of what that is. But basically, as long as we get a strong majority of SPOs, again, I would aim for 80 and 90% updated. We'll be fine because the bad transactions just won't propagate across the network, even though the blocks still allow them. So we don't. So like DApps and DEXs are already finishing up with their integrations on 10.1.3. Won't have to bother with doing an extra node update. That's basically the high level of it. So if you're an SPO, update. If you're not an SPO, you don't have to, but there's no reason you shouldn't either. So.
And shout out to Mike Hornan for all the work he did testing the node.
Absolutely, yeah. Mike Hornan, working with the Ledger team, both found the issue and came up with a quick fix for it really quickly over Christmas break, basically.
Yeah, you guys are heroes.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, in terms of, people like capability of the Cardano community to handle governance, I think we're there. We're watching everybody move in the past 4 years and how issues have been addressed. I'm looking forward to it. I think we got a lot of smart people here. So right now, if you guys want, I don't see any hands up, but if you want some alpha, that's not just speculation, type in alpha.atrium.io. 99% of what we're bringing to mainnet is already there, right? So if you guys want to see what product is launching on mainnet in a few months, you can go see what it looks like right now and go play around with it. And there's an airdrop hooked up to it. You level up your profile NFT, the higher level, the bigger airdrop. And the way that you level it up is by doing stuff that, a lot of us already do, being in the Discord, being on Twitter, and do an on-chain engagement. It's all on Preview Network, so no risk there. We got a new speaker up here, though. Maximilian, you have a question for us?
Yeah, hi, I'm from Germany, and I'm running for national parliament in the upcoming German elections. And I'm invested in Cardano, and there's a lot of talk about crypto in Germany, but it's mostly about Bitcoin, as you may know from your countries. So what do you think is the perspective for a more diverse discussion about crypto in politics generally?
That's a big question. Anybody want to take it?
I would say that one of the things that countries can look at and politicians can look at is, how can blockchain systems increase the transparency of your own civic institutions? One of the easy, big things that we talk about is, well, if we can do voting on a blockchain, then we would have verifiable ways of identifying who has cast a vote and having a timestamp and immutable record for doing it. But I mean, that's a really big lift. We have, voting systems are very slow to move for a good reason. It's because we don't want to mess up what we currently have. Whereas, if you start looking at, just even the basic services that a government provides, you start saying things like, well, what about if we could start offering some of our, records tracking, through blockchain systems, right? Every time that we have